Miners.
Righto, g'day money miners, mate. She's all go. What have boys? We've got a bit of bloody oil and gas today. Santos Woodside update, mate. But the big stuff we're going right into, mate. Kazakhstan, the yellow cake implications, mate. There's a bit going on there beyond possibly sulfuric acid supply, and it's mate,
politics.
All those U-bulls out there, hang on to your seats because it is coming. Bloody what else? South 32, you're going to bloody rip them a new arsehole a bit, Trav? Is that a good way to say it?
Look, I'm gonna go deep on that one. I got some questions. Yeah.
Who's answering them?
Probably no one, but but it's best to pose them into the abyss, and sometimes the information comes back to you, Matty.
Oh, very good. We've bloody plucked the news out everywhere today. But WAF's production guidance update to Grey. Having a little bit of a purchase. KoBold Metals. Every rich bastard is involved in that over the world. Arafura, new MD. That's a...
What did you notice on the CV there, Matty? Maybe in the mission.
Yeah, there's some... I added to what they could have put in there. And then Evolution's non-successful share purchase plan, you'd say.
Yeah, a couple of disgruntled retail shareholders
On
I'd
the
imagine.
hook. So, all right, boys, so, mate, Google's lighting up at the moment when you type in in WA at the moment, like the first three stories I've seen. Is the WA media too obsessed with Basil Zemplis and his political aspirations? He's everywhere in Perth, but is Basil Zemplis the man to save the WA Liberals? I think we established last week that possibly he isn't. And I think it might be Adam Wilson from KCA. I just, following that ad, I see the news lighten up that question whether Baz is the man or is Adam the man.
Well,
I think we established there was a possible vote one Adam Wilson coming up.
This will be Kerry Stokes' media machine versus the Money of Mine media machine in terms of promoting Basil versus promoting Adam.
There's only one winner there.
There's a new player in the camp, media agencies. No, but anyway, see what happens when a few nickel mines shut down. There's a bit of uncertainty in the market. Adam's like doesn't leave it to chance. He's like, right, I'll have politics as a backup. So it's that type of guy. Because mate, I can't talk about it enough. The bloody how he's pretty much saves the mining industry when they need machinery. Downturns, upturns, mate. There is no other place you go to these days to get a piece of underground mining equipment or miscellaneous other equipment for surface or just running errands like people and equipment, people and bloody stuff around than the KCA equipment hire fleet.
It's got everything.
It's got everything, and it's from that attitude that we talked about. No is not an option. No, I will not buy that because he just buys it. That's what KCA does. They buy everything and hire it out. People, equipment, bloody everything, and a bloody great supporter of the show, run by underground miners, made for underground mining. I think I got pulled up for saying bloody too much. I reckon I said it 17 times. But, mate, when I say bloody, it's because I'm bloody excited and I bloody love the mob. KCA. Get behind KCA's and equipment political aspirations.
I think you got pulled up for saying it about 7 times in 15 seconds, mate.
Oh, mate, it's usually when it's talking about anything underground mining related.
Gets the blood pumping.
Right, boys. Santos Woodside, the merger talks extended and quite interesting that was starting with oil and gas, and it sort of perked a possible, I don't know, triggered something in my thoughts because, do you know Eva and Helen from MMTS have actually like snorkeling and diving is one of their key hobbies outside of managing tenements.
I did not know that at all.
It is.
Yeah, did not know that.
Do it every weekend. But knowing the work ethic of that company, this story has triggered the fact that it might not be a hobby. I think Now, I'm going out now. We know a lot of my predictions actually come true, but I have a hunch that this snorkeling and diving hobby of Eva and Helen is now scouring the ocean floor for oil and gas tenements because mining on land tenements, which they absolutely manage superbly, as we said, across bloody all the WA, South Australia, New South Wales and Queensland. Possibly, I think they're branching out into oil and gas.
I don't know if that's true.
Is there a company out there that can scour the ocean floor for tenements?
Can you do that?
Oh,
You have to peg the
there
bottom
would
of
be
the...
one company in the world that I reckon will have a go at it, is MMTS.
I think they got the software to secure it if the tenure
Exactly.
became available. But,
Exactly.
But seafloor mining, is not exactly delivered the most exciting results to date.
Well, MMTS, from what I know, are just always on the front foot. So, and I think that this is the next logical step. So, look, happy to be corrected if that's actually what they're doing when they're snorkeling and diving. But knowing them, I would not be surprised.
They're the only name in the West Australian market. They're growing rapidly on the other side of Australia in Queensland, New South Wales, Victoria, and soon the ocean floor.
Soon the ocean floor. Logical next step, I think. So, mate, it is heating up. MMTS managing, what would you call it? Managing mining and oil and gas tenements superbly. Brilliant business. WA born and bred. We bloody love them too. Cheers, MMTS, for keeping the mining and oil and gas industry alive. Right, speaking of Santos and Woodside, boys, merge talks extended. We did a bit of that's where Big Thompson, the oil and gas guru, come in and shared his expertise in this. It was a bloody ripper of an episode in December. Head back and have a watch about the ins and outs of the Santos Woodside potential merger, but it sounds like DD's continuing and it's, I guess, dragging on a bit and a few other bits at play. What's going on, boys?
Yeah, I think you've sort of summed up the majority of it there, Matty. The key thing is what are the reads into it? What can you read from these two majors continuing to chat? And just as a refresher, given we talk mostly about hard rock mining, Woodside is a $60+ billion company and Santos is a $25 billion company. So there's obviously plenty to sort of chat through. There's a lot of, assets, obviously some key assets that will make up the majority of the portfolio afterwards. But as well as those assets, you've got past liabilities that need to be settled. So there's no signs of any interlopers wanting to get involved in the deal. That would have to be a offshore major. And I think it's just worth bearing in mind that this is an all-scrip deal that we're talking about. So I think the ultimate read from these talks that the conversations are ongoing is that the deal is looking likely that it'll go ahead. And, unfortunately for the people of Adelaide, it looks likely that they're going to lose another major company from that city.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of things coming from each side. Woodside shareholders are saying, do we need Santos? Santos shareholders are saying, we want more of a premium, that old bloody chestnut, I think. I think there's a lot
surprises.
of play. Yeah, and I think because they're looking at, because the big project, I didn't know it was actually this big, the Scarborough gas project in WA. So if they merge, that's a $16.5 billion project. That will be 28% of the merge co once it's off the ground. But there's obviously a lot of approval hurdles still to go for that one. Bloody begging for environmental lobbying by the sounds. So thanks, Peter Kerr, for that 28% fact and figure. Appreciate it, mate.
No worries.
Trav, what do you think of it, mate?
Well, also got Barossa adding a good bit of the value from the Santos side.
Yeah, I think the activist angle on this story is pretty interesting as well because there's some institutions which we know of via their activism in the mining world in the past, being L1 Capital, Wilson Asset Management and Tribeca Investment Partners. They've basically all lined up on advocating that Santos actually just does a review of its own assets and splits them up, basically separate the LNG business from the rest of the assets. And they sort of argue that that move in itself, just splitting up Santos's current assets, could deliver a 40% uplift in aggregate value. So, and this is a bit of an argument that I've heard repeated, is that a merger with Woodside is a silly outcome for Santos shareholders. These assets are ultimately they're tougher assets than what Woodside's portfolio's got typically, and they should be run leaner. If you merge with Woodside, then you're adding more fat into that, which might be worse for margins. And in Santos's case, why merge at a bloody a negligible kind of premium when they're those kind of assets that might actually belong in a leaner organisation.
At least they're merging at a premium, unlike Silver Lake.
Well, is it a premium? I mean, we don't know a merger ratio yet, and the fact that DD's kind of kicked down the track probably indicates that a relative exchange rate is still being negotiated if it proceeds. But the big factor there is Kevin Gallagher, a pretty big personality in the energy world, who heads up Santos. Yeah, I mean, look, he's a polarizing figure, and a merger with Santos here might actually pave the way for his exit from that business. So there's a bunch of different rationales going on here, and the activists, I think, will play a role in the final outcome.
Because I think if the LNG assets stay within the merge co, and they do merge, they're gonna be the world's biggest LNG player. So, and I think Woodside, by the sounds, are trying to sell that to Santos as a possible re-rate if that comes to fruition. But if they do merge, I think they're going to have like 50% of WA's domestic gas supply will come from them, so that'll probably create competition issues. East Coast is not as dominant. I think it's more of a coal-based economy, and look, Exxon owns half of Bass Strait and Woodside owns the other half, and there's other players over that side. But it doesn't sound like there's any interlopers at this stage for this deal, because your bigger companies like BP, I think Santos is too small for them, and they want cleaner portfolios these days with going into renewables and hydrogen more. And Exxon and Chevron, they're doing like a lot more M&A in the US, and what it only really leaves Middle Eastern and national oil companies, which don't usually do too much M&A on public markets. So I think Street Talk Pete, Mr. Kerr mentioned international majors like Houston's ConocoPhillips and France's Total, but said they're probably unlikely to do anything. So we'll wait and see, lads.
I sure will. Alrighty, gents. Should we talk about some politics in Kazakhstan?
Oh, we're going beyond the yellow cake, are we? We're getting into the politics, which is driving the yellow cake. I bloody love
exactly,
it.
Matty. That is
what is going on?
That's why we're talking about it. The yellow cake, but we're going to be a bit light on the politics here. Obviously, we're no experts in Kazakhstan, but there's been some pretty eye-catching news. So you've got the Kazakhstani president, Kazim Tokayev, and he's really purging his government that he sort of put in place not too long ago. He came into power in the late 2010s, and there's no doubt that Kazakhstan is an authoritarian regime. So it's kind of interesting. You'll read headlines around what's just happened in the past day to the effect of Kazakhstan president accepts the government's resignation. I think we all know that this isn't your standard sort of resignation, and besides, there's set fixed terms behind how the Senate and the various members of government operate there anyway. So it's a sort of reshuffle that they do semi-regularly there in Kazakhstan. So the government had a real power struggle in 2022 between the incumbent in power and the president who was in power prior to that, and there was pretty violent protests. And Tokayev, the current president, he gained more power through that period and cracked down pretty firmly. He put a new prime minister in place and changed up the cabinet. And today he's really consolidating his power further. And why this is interesting is because a lot of the people in the uranium market, a lot of the bulls out there, thought that this could be a sort of thesis in which, you could see uranium, or the price of uranium, push up further. And it hasn't really materialized that way for a couple reasons. So no reasons were ultimately given for the resignations today, but it's pretty clear that one of Tokayev's key ambitions is attracting foreign investment in the country. And he's been mining friendly. He's done an okay job at this. He's been pretty critical of his government's inability to advance this. And from afar, it's been fascinating to see how he sort of plays a balancing act between Russia to the north and then China to the east and the west all around the world. I think this is pretty well demonstrated by having the Russian troops come in and support him during the crackdowns in 2022, as well as sort of playing Xi Jinping with the China's Belt and Road Initiative over the past few years, as well as getting the likes of Chevron and other oil majors out of the US to invest massive amounts in the country. So touching back on uranium, Kazakhstan, as
This
we
is what
went
we
into
want
the
to know,
detail.
JD. What does it mean for the U-Bulls?
Exactly. So Kazakhstan, which we touched on with Justin in our chat, they produce 3 times more than the next biggest producer in uranium. And as I sort of mentioned, Toki has been friendly. He's wanting more and more foreign investment in the country. So this theory that him gaining a firmer sort of grasp of power there, leading to a more bullish read on the uranium prices, didn't really materialize at all. And obviously, like the supply coming out of Kazakhstan is something that all these bulls have their eyes fixed on. You can see thousands and thousands of tweets about this. Justin spoke about it at length when we spoke last week. So it's hard to get a much cleaner read on Kazatomprom and why they're having such issues on this production. They've constantly pointed to this issue around sulfuric acid, and it seems, it's somewhat implausible. We're trying to dig deeper in it, and, I can say to the money miners that we're working on this one, and we're hopefully going to have someone come on the show to really unpack this. But it seems a bit implausible that these production downgrades year after year are a result of purely sulfuric acid. So I'm keen to really dive deeper into that and do some more work about it. But in the meantime, a lot of these people were expecting the uranium price to go on a bit of a tear, and that never really eventuated, or didn't eventuate over the past couple of days. So keep our eyes peeled over the short term there.
Well, I think as you mentioned in the Justin chat, Trav, it's like, even if it's not directly the sulfuric acid, it's a function of the fact that so much more is needed because the quality is depleting, and they're getting to the end of the cycle in some areas of those paleo channels, which is a double whammy because you need a shitload more acid to leach out the same rate.
Yeah, I could be wrong about this, but wasn't Kazatoprom's announcement of a missed production, which Justin indicated would be likely to happen? Wasn't that didn't Kazatomprom's share price go up on that news? It must be the first time in bloody history that a mining company's missed production and it's been bullish for the share price.
Yeah. Bloody.
When the expectations are that low, that's sort of what happens, eh?
Well, I don't even know if it's expectations, but it was more like the fact if they miss production, that has a pretty substantial impact on expectations of available supply. And then that obviously
price.
Is positive to their earnings from a price perspective.
Yeah.
Which is wild.
If that outweighs the reduction in actual production by the company, it's it's pretty interesting.
Well,
like you said, not something we see often.
Well, the second biggest global producer, Cameco, they're coming out with their production announcement this Thursday night. So that's also going to be an interesting one to see how everything's going with their operations, and that'll obviously be a big player on the price as well. So stay tuned, money miners.
It'll be a sleepless night, Matty.
Oh, I'll be up. I'm gonna live stream it. Why not? Right, Trav, South 32, the balance sheet. What is going on, mate? What has sparked your interest?
Well,
these things build over time for you.
they do. Sometimes you just get a bit of a smell that you got to look into something. And I've been getting that smell with South 32. I've been keen to look into it. My interest was piqued when we got talking about them in the IGO Regis royalty fiasco just last week.
Which it perked. It's like, right, do they? And we're talking about timing. It's like they might need cash now.
Well, that was the open-ended question that we all had when telling that story. It was why is this only just popping up at South 32 now? Did they only just become aware of the existence of this royalty, which should have been, according to them, was supposed to be paying ever since production, like 10 years ago or whatever. So, or is there more to the story? And so I've been trying to answer that question by fishing around for as much information as I can. And in my digging, I think I might have just created more questions than I've answered them. But nevertheless, I'm keen to bring you fellas and the money miners on the journey with me. To start with, these were the two potential theories that I had in my head about the royalty timing to IGO and Regis there. The first theory was that South 32 only just discovered it and that they're acting on it now since they just discovered it. The other theory was they've known about it for a while, but it was one of those like levers that you keep up the sleeve for a rainy day when you need it, and maybe now they need it. Now, it's bloody hard to figure out which theory is more accurate, but the logical thing to do is to take a look at South 32's balance sheet right now to see if they need it now. And this is where I started to, pry into things that looked pretty interesting to me.
Well, before you go into it, Trav, Explain South 32's business. Who is South 32, young sir?
We don't talk about them very much because they're too big and too complicated for us, mate. But South
Not
32,
anymore.
Not anymore, no. South 32 obviously came into existence from a demerger with BHP did a demerger in 2015. At the time, you could think of it as all of BHP's shit assets spun out into this separate vehicle called South 32. You know, the higher cost quartile assets, the alumina business, where BHP had a lot of downstream refining, you know, manganese, higher cost coal in funky jurisdictions like South Africa, those sorts of assets.
And that I guess Cannington was probably their, maybe, I don't know if it was classed as the flagship asset, but that was
Just because you worked there.
Yeah, it's all fucking bloody traumatising times. But that was like when BHP had Cannington, like because it was the highest grade silver mine in the world, I'm pretty sure, along with also very high grade lead and zinc. And before it was spun out, like all the glory days had by BHP was. It was just a money printing machine, like absolutely phenomenal ore body. I've never seen anything like it. Just this big, massive blob, like huge. And like when they just started from the middle and mined out. So when they started in the middle, they had these like 200 metre high stopes that they'd just keep dropping dirt into, and if it bloody 200 metre high wall, if it started over breaking or fretting, it didn't matter because it was all just ore around it. So you just fill it up with paste and then keep going. So, but I think once they spun it out and it became South 32, that's when they were sort of started mining around the fringes a bit more. So all the glory days were sort of gone. There's still, I think it was still going till early 2030s. Like the grades they were getting were like, I think it was like in the double-digit lead percentages, like 14% lead, and the whole like infrastructure down there because it's a hoisting system, so all the shaft area is contained within like 14% lead. So the last place they'll take out is, I don't know if they've already removed it or not, but they remove all the infrastructure and they'll take all that area out, and it's like 14% lead. So they didn't even have to. They made money while they were developing the crushing area. Wow. Pretty phenomenal. So because they also purchased that Hermosa base metals project in Arizona. That's the one they paid US $1.3 billion for the remaining 83% of the project they didn't own, and then mid last year they wrote that asset down by US $1.3 billion
after spending money on it
and bloody blowing capex blowouts and delays. Still waiting for FID on that this quarter apparently. So
yeah, the portfolio transition for South 32 has been a big part of their story since the demerger. I mean, you look at some of the wording that the company puts out now, and they talk about shifting the portfolio composition to include some commodities critical for a low carbon future. What a phrase, Matty and Shady. I always find
still got a bit of BHP in it.
Well, it's funny, right? Because every company has a different phrase to try and encapsulate this similar concept. For BHP, it's future-facing commodities because they need to include potash, right? And for South 32, it's commodities critical for a low-carbon future because that probably lets them include their low-carbon aluminium and might even let them include their met coal. But who knows? So look, they've over their journey though, they've divested a lot of their coal assets. They've added copper, base metals, like you said there. And if you look at the sum of the parts valuations from the brokers these days, you get about 50% of what the net asset value of this company is being attributable to their aluminium/alumina refining business. And that includes key assets being Worsley, Hillside Aluminium, which is the largest aluminium smelter in the Southern Hemisphere in South Africa there. You've got aluminium, Mosel Aluminium, which is in Mozambique, Brazil Aluminium. You get the picture, right? And having a higher cost asset, South 32 is the sort of business that doesn't make too much money for most of the cycle and then makes a shitload when there's a commodity price rip in their flavour, and then kind of experiences the ebbs and flows that come with the cyclical industry and not exactly being a lowest cost quartile producer. So
what's the balance sheet looking like
now
in this commodity price market?
That's what I wanted to know, right? It's important to point out that South 32 does have disciplined capital management framework. They pay dividends, they do buybacks, and the capital markets like those distributions, of course. So at the core of this commitment, though, is to maintain a healthy credit rating too, which means not too much debt. But when I looked under the hood, I think there's a reason to be a little bit curious about their financial position in the lead up to earnings results, which are due on the 15th of February for South32, fellas, which is just 9 days away, by the way. And that's because I think their balance sheet is under more pressure than it has been for the entire decade of their existence. Let me articulate this with a few charts. The first one I'm bringing up here is just net debt. Simple. Easy one to understand, right? Literally just net debt. And you can see here that basically ever since that first year that South32 was spun out, they went from net debt to a net cash position immediately and stayed there ever since until FY23, which is last year. And the shaded bars at the end there, the last four, are actually just consensus estimates from the various investment bank analysts out there. And mate, it's a pretty sharp climb there expected for what's to come out on the 15th of February, just around the corner. I mean, consensus is that net debt is pretty chunky. I read Macquarie are expecting it to be as high as US 1.4 billion. RBC say 920 million.
Both aren't good.
Consensus there is just under $1 billion US there. The next chart I'm gonna remove analyst forecasts for the future years going forward. I'm just going to show you just a credit metric just to see the trend of South32 over the long term here. This is just total debt to EBITDA from FY15 all the way through to FY23. And I mean, basically the point here is it's the highest it's been since 2015 again. And that last number there is as at 30 June last year. With those projections you can see on net debt increasing. You can imagine it's going to be potentially even the highest it's ever been to be reported very shortly. So South32 has historically paid special dividends at its half-year results announcements. I'm not so sure investors should expect that this time around. Cash generation looks tight. They have this 40% payout ratio under their capital allocation framework, and they might actually find themselves wedded to paying a dividend yield just via enhancing their leverage at the moment, which when you go to uni and you study corporate finance 101, the professors aren't exactly advocating for companies to pay dividends by just borrowing more. But I'm kind of thinking that might actually be what's going to come out of this earnings result. I'm not entirely sure. But
is that because they have to, because of that capital allocation framework?
Yeah, I mean, they're paying a payout ratio based on their what their earnings are. So if your earnings are crap, then it's not like you're paying out more. But sometimes the market just gets pretty grumpy if you don't pay dividends, Matty, if they come to expect it. So sometimes people are a bit more, management sometimes a bit more worried about, maintaining investor sentiment because they constantly pay this dividend yield, and sometimes they'll lever up in order to do that. But if you look at it, analysts are expecting earnings to be lower at almost all of their operations to come out this half. That they actually produce a lot of nickel from a laterite project as well, Serra Matosol, which, given the nickel market dynamics we're all aware of, that's probably like losing money at the moment. If you go back to those Macquarie numbers, they model free cash outflow of US 743 million in the half.
Outflow, Jesus Christ.
Yeah. So that balance sheet looks tight, right? I mean, let's see how they handle this with their capital allocation. Will they dial it back? Will they keep distributing to shareholders by adding debt? What impact will that have to their credit rating? All of this matters, right? And I think given the context around that, I'm kind of starting to better understand the potential royalty grab. I mean, I don't have the answers here, but if your credit rating could be under pressure, every $122 million matters. If you the one thing that was pointed out to me was, heck, $122 million in the context of South32's market cap is nothing, right? And that's true. But $122 million in the context of your net debt calculation for the purposes of a credit metric does matter a lot. So
$122 million means a lot if you're losing $750 of a bill out the door in a half.
So just wait and see. I'm really interested in what's going on at South32 now, and I haven't had the urge to really look into it before. So
yeah, right.
Ricardinho, you've piqued my interest as well. And just on Serra Matosol, the nickel asset, there was a really interesting number that's stuck in my mind since they came out with their quarterly a couple of weeks ago now. And that was regarding the payability that they get for the nickel product there. And that payability figure was a 29% discount to the LME nickel index. And they, went on to speak about structural changes in the nickel market, like every single nickel player has recently. But that was a discount to the benchmark price that has definitely widened. And it was just a really interesting number to read out and give you a good bit of insight into what's going on in the nickel market.
JD, West African resources, your favourite part of the world.
Oh, my favourite part, and this won't be the only time we're talking about Africa today, but
down over 10% today on their updated guidance.
I'll run through the numbers and then share my thoughts on the market reaction. But the 2024 guidance, and this is all coming from Sanbrado as Kiaka is scheduled to come on second half of 2025. So it was down 10% at 200,000 ounces as guidance versus 2023. But this isn't a surprise. They came out with a production plan. It's been public for quite a while now. So, the market participants should know what that number is, and their sort of strategy is to replace a few of the less ounces that they're getting from the open pit with a few more from underground. On the cost side of things, operating costs and all-in sustaining costs are up over 10%, which is obviously not great. And, all-in sustaining costs coming in at around Aussie $2,000 is slightly, just marginally above expectations. As we, spoke about at length last week, higher costs are often a result of lower production. So the other key number is growth capex. $250 million US is the midpoint, and that's going to Kiaka, which they're trying to get online in the next 18 odd months. So on my thoughts on what the market made of this, when I last looked, Matty, it was down 12%. Given it's not been the best day for the goldies out there, but I can't help but feel that this is a bit of a short-term view by the market on the company. Nothing was really outrageously surprising in this announcement today, yet they're down over 12%. Kiaka remains on time and on budget. So, like we've said every single time we've spoken about this company, they're sort of in the sin bin, but I couldn't totally wrap my head around why they're getting beaten up so much on today's announcement.
Oh, it's such an interesting company to follow in the sense of the massive West African discount for a company that has consistently produced free cash flow, and a lot of that is going into funding Kiaka, but they're just, that's what the name is, West African Resources. So
you're dead right. Should we talk about some West Australian gold? Next up, De Grey.
Now this is a familiar name. The option to acquire the Ashburton project for Kalamazoo, who the money miners might remember as the spin out of Cali Metals alongside Karora. So how do you spell it? Kalamazoo.
Kalamazoo, yeah.
Kalamazoo. Speaking of that, I'm glad some YouTubers said, I thought it was pronounced Kazatomprom as well. That's how I said it. So I'm not the only bloody bad pronouncer out there. Mate, what's going on?
It's normally me that butchers the pronunciation, so that's good to hear. But so De Grey, they're paying $3 million up front in the next 5 days for this option to acquire the Ashburton project. And then they have an option period, which is 12 to 18 months. That's at De Grey's election. And they'll have to put in $1 million minimum into the ground. Now, if they decide to exercise it, they'll have to pay $15 million and then another $15 million within 18 months. So all up, there's potential that they'll pay $33 million plus at least $1 million in the ground. But it is noteworthy that those two lots of $15 million can be paid in De Grey stock as well. So getting into what they're buying, Ashburton consists of some mining leases and exploration leases. A 1.44 million ounce gold resource comes with it. It's about 300 kilometres from Hemi. Now, there's been some previous studies as well as, this thing has been mined in the past, but it's sort of indicating, and this is what De Grey really want to get into, that they could create a gold concentrate that could then be delivered to the Hemi POX plant once that's all built. So the mine, like I said, has been mined in the past. It churned out 350,000 ounces from 98 to 2004 at a pretty decent 3.3 grams per tonne. I can't help but think that the timing is pretty notable, though, given that you'd think this company is firmly focused on financing Hemi. They've got heaps on their plate, and they've said they'll create a separate team to to study the potential here at Ashburton. But, you know, I'm a bit skeptical that this news is a bit distracting, but could give them the benefit of the doubt and just say perhaps in a few years' time it'll be a good deal, and could be a cheap way to increase ounces at their gold project.
I mean, it might be there to additional gold concentrate to justify the capex spend that's going to be required for a 800,000 tonne POX train.
You could be on the money there, mate.
So yeah, they're still sitting and waiting for either a finance or a takeout, I assume, in regards to Hemi. We haven't heard too much after the DFS and that big raise, have we?
Not really. Stocks just shot up and then trailed back off slowly over time. So yeah, we'll sort of keep our eyes peeled. I think they've got their work cut out for them.
Right, back to Africa, JD. KoBold Metals. Now, mate, anything when you got bloody Bill Gates and Jeff Bezos attached to it just gets headlines. So just a couple of bloody high profile backers for this this bloody high grade massive copper deposit in Zambia. So check out this, because it's all backed by this Breakthrough Energy Ventures. Check out check out the names on the list. I'll flash it up. Mate, Twiggy Forrest, Jack Ma from Alibaba Group, Michael Bloomberg, Ray Dalio, Reid Hoffman, LinkedIn founder, Virgin's Richard Branson, got the Shopify founders on there, a heap of other bloody rich people. JD, you would have heard of most of these people when you're reading expeditions.
Not your typical mining investors.
Mate, she's a bloody, talk about a consortium of money. Right. What's the crux, JD? Take me on a Zambia journey.
Mate, that is quite the list of backers. So the gist with KoBold Metals is essentially that they think they can be far more effective with data and use it in a more AI-driven manner, a lot of buzzwords, than more traditional miners. And, you know, the flow-on effect is that they can be more cost-effective and essentially target exploration better. So they've been pretty outspoken that they never want to actually operate a mine. They just want to be the ones that expedite that discovery process. So they bought into a joint venture with the Aussie PE group here in Melbourne, actually, EMR Capital, as well as the Zambian state-owned ZCCM, into a asset in Zambia, so a copper asset that's been known for a little while. Now, they came out at Indaba, the big mining conference in Cape Town, just today, and said this is the biggest discovery in Zambia in 100 years. Now, my first thoughts, boys, I'm not sure about you, was that sort of promotion, the guy Josh Goldberg could earn a place running a specky company out of West Perth. He was all over it, but KoBold isn't even publicly traded. They're a classic Silicon Valley venture-backed startup, although there's a eye-watering amount of PhDs on their website. So getting into the asset itself, Mingoba, it sits at about 250 million tonnes at 3.6% copper.
Wow.
And it's huge. And they've got their eyes, firmly on 5% copper as well. They have spoken about similarities with Kamoa-Kakula, so Robert Friedland's Ivanhoe mine-owned project in the DRC, so just the other side of the border there, and really talking up the similarities. And it's going to be a pretty expensive operation to get into production. They're talking about a $2 billion price tag to build the thing, and it's still a few years away. 2027 would be the soonest that would happen.
Serious grade.
Oh, yeah, and the bloody tons. God, what a 10 million tonne per annum mill. That's 25-year mine life just based on that, what they've got already. So that is a phenomenal amount of bloody material. So
absolutely huge. And on the back of this, I saw some really interesting comments come out from the Zambian government. So they said they're looking to commence commodities trading. So they want to go head-to-head with, Mercuria and Glencore and the likes. And obviously they'll prioritize copper, given it's Zambia. This was sort of also announced at Indaba in sort of concurrence with the KoBold announcement. There was a quote from a senior advisor saying that our benefits from the sector have been quite minimal. Now, my first thoughts reading that, knowing that First Quantum have a couple copper mines in Zambia, is that those guys must be having serious deja vu that what happened in Panama is about to happen to them all over again. And you can't help but think KoBold Metals, as well as Barrick and a bunch of others, Glencore and country there, are going to be keeping a very close eye on how the copper narrative plays out and how, government royalties and all these sorts of things play out in tandem with that story.
Old Robert, your mate Robert Friedland, geez, he's getting pretty active on the interviews and Twitter and everything about copper right now. He's really pushing the thesis.
Yeah, he was well and truly born for the promote, and I don't think he shies away from the camera too much, Matty.
I saw that interview on one of the American TV things. He was just like, China produced this much copper and now they've got this much less copper or something. He was pretty brutal and direct to the host. It was bloody hilarious. When Robert Friedland runs one over you, you'd be like, whoa, geez, be an experience.
We'll have a chat with him on the show one day.
Now, Matty, you pulled up an announcement today and you recognised the name. Good old Arafura. What's going on there?
God, look at me go. I remember talking about this. This was something I covered in the early days before you two bloody buggers come on board and saved my soul. I knew the name KoBold. It just sparked me interest, Trav. I knew there was a history. So Arafura, they've announced the rare earth play, in the bloody absolute arsehole of Australia. Mate, they've just announced a new MD, Daryl KoBold. He was already a non-exec director for Arafura. So this is on the back of the MD, Gavin Lockyer, resigning after 10 years as the MD, 17 years with the company. So it says here, you look at Daryl KoBold's experience, over 30 years of experience across global senior exec roles, 24 years with BHP. But they neglect to mention, which obviously you can see why they haven't, he was in the news for the last couple of years for the high-profile sacking from SolGold in late 22. And this, remember, it was 2 days after they did that $50 million royalty financing deal with the Cisco Gold for that Casabel project in Ecuador. So then that was the one that really pissed off the major shareholders, Newcrest and BHP, because the royalty deal to bring in 50 mil was a very expensive way for future earnings, the amount of future earnings that took away because of the royalty that was put on it.
Yep.
So at the end of last year, KoBold then lodged a $2.3 million unfair dismissal claim against SolGold.
I did not know that.
Claiming his sacking was a breach of his contract and the Fair Work Act. So, because he was terminated from SolGold because they believe that he released confidential information to Franco-Nevada before announcing the Cisco financing. So because Franco-Nevada were an existing lender and they were also in the negotiations, I think, for that royalty deal. So, but then, he's claiming that one of the advisors called him a fucking moron and all this stuff. And
mate, if I was the board, I would have just sacked him for putting a royalty on an asset that has corporate appeal.
Then he was claiming that from the AFR article that the chairman was directing him to do it as well, and so there's plenty of argy-bargy going on there. So bit of history that wasn't in the announcement. So it'd be interesting to see. I haven't seen what the result of that court case was. I don't know if there is one yet.
You were like, you saw this and you're like, KoBold, that's a SolGold guy. And I'm reading the announcement.
It's not like it's Smith.
Do a control F, no SolGold mention in this one.
Yes, I did notice that.
But it's a really important takeaway, right? Because people in the mining industry pop up over and over again, and everyone's keen to talk about their successes and very quick to admit the failures or admit the negative news, but a quick Google search will help you out. Yeah.
Not concluded what the outcome is there, so we don't know if it's who's in the wrong or right, but yes, it's very interesting history, I thought. All right, JD, Evolution's share purchase plan completes, and thank God they had a VWAP option in there by the sounds.
Yeah, so the issue price got revised a bit through when I think it became apparent that $3.80 was a bit steep and they weren't going to get the $60 million that they were after in the SPP. So with that said, they still only raised $32 million of a target 60. So I think that just speaks to the level of discontent out there at the moment by the retail shareholders. So
Very good. Righto, boys. Thank you to you, Trav. Thank you to JD. And thanks to our partners.
Thank you, partners.
I like you too as much as I like them. Yeah,
we like
there's
them
a
too.
bloody compliment for you. Mate,
That is great to hear, Matty.
Speaking of them, because you know how much I love the partners. Mate, VRIFY. Get on the grant at VRIFY if you've got nothing to hide in your ore body. Simple as that. No E in VRIFY. Mate, and InvestorHub, if you want to market your verified document to investors, get rhori at InvestorHub to help you do that. Just, as I said, on a platter, money miners. Mate, DSI Underground also, SMEC Power and Technology, McMahon Mining Title Services, Anytime Exploration Services, KCA Site Services, Brooks Airways, and last but not least, K-Drill. Hooroo, money miners.
The information contained in this episode of Money of Mine is of general nature only and does not take into account the objectives, financial situation or needs of any particular person. Before making any investment decision, you should consult with your financial advisor and consider how appropriate the advice is to your objectives, financial situation and needs.